Hello guys, this is part 49 of SQL Server. In this session we will learn about common table expression. Before continuing with this session, I strongly recommend to watch part 48 of this video series. Common table expression are introduced in SQL Server 2005. So what is a CTE? A CTE is a temporary result set that can be referenced within select, insert, update, or delete statement that immediately follows the CTE. Let's understand what we mean by this definition with an example. So here you can find the syntax for creating CTE. So to create a CTE, we use the with keyword. For example, to create a stored procedure, we use create stored procedure command. Similarly, to create a table, we use a create table command. But to create a CTE, we use the with keyword. So with keyword followed by the name of the CTE and then the columns that would make a pure CTE. So what is a CTE? A CTE is a temporary result set. So obviously a result set will have columns. So what are the columns? That would make a pure result set. That is what you specify here within a pair of parentheses. Then you use a as keyword, then another set of parentheses, and then your CTE query here, CTE query there. Let's look at this with an example. We have two tables, TBL employee and TBL department tables. TBL employee has got ID, name, gender, and department ID columns, and TBL department has got department ID and department name columns. Now let's say I want you to write a query which gives me an output that you can see here. I want the total number of employee by department name, by department. Obviously to achieve this output, I don't have to use a CTE. I can simply achieve this by using joins and group by. But since we are talking about CTE here, let's see how to achieve this using a CTE. So I'm creating a CTE. So I'm creating a CTE called employee count. I'm using the with keyword. Employee count. So employee count is the name of the CTE. So employee count is the name of the CTE. And department ID and total employee are the columns that form, that CTE, that forms you know that CTE as sorry. And then this is your select query, and then this is your select query. So if you look at this query, it is pretty straightforward. What is this query doing? It is selecting two columns: department ID and total employees. Okay, count of staff and total employees from TBL employee group by department ID. So this query will return the total number of employees by department ID. But if you look in the output, I want total number of employees by department name. Okay. So this select query is nothing but your CTE query. So this select query is nothing but your CTE query. And if you look at this select query, it is returning these two columns. And these two columns will map, to these two columns. That you can see here. You know, this CTE has got department ID and total number of and total employees. Your select query has got department ID and total employees. So these columns map to these columns map to these CTE columns. Okay. And then look at the way we are using this CTE. This CTE is now being used in this select query. So you are joining the employee count, and then again I am repeating it. And then look at the way we are using this CTE. This CTE is now being used in this select query. So you are joining the employee count CTE with TBL department table. And why are we doing that? Because the employee count CTE has got department ID and total employees department ID and total employees. CTE has got the employee count. CTE has got department ID and total employees. Department table has got department ID and department name. Department table has got department ID and department name. Here you can see department table has got department ID and department name. So we join the employee count with TBL department. So we join the employee count CTE with the TBL department on the department ID on the department ID columns, on the department ID columns, and we retrieve the department name, and we retrieve the department name from TBL department, from TBL department, from TBL department. We are retrieving the department name from TBL department, and total employees from employee count CTE, and total employees from employee count CTE. Total employee from employee count CTE. And finally we order by, and finally we order by total employees. So if you execute this entire query, if you execute this entire query, we get the output that you see here. We get the output that we get the output that you see here. This, if we execute this entire query, we get the output that you see here. Okay, let's look at this CTE in action. Let's look at this CTE in action. So we are creating a CTE. So we are creating a CTE with employee count. These are the columns. These are the columns that would make this CTE as and this is the CTE query, and this is the CTE query. The select query that would actually serve the data for this CTE. So now when I actually execute this select query alone, look at this, I get this. So execute this. So execute this. Look at this. I get this. This is nothing but a temporary result set. This is nothing but a temporary result set, and for this result set you are giving a name. You are giving a name called employee count, and this column department ID and total employees returned by your select query. Is up to the column, in this CTE. Okay. And then what you are doing, you join this employee count, and what are you doing? You join this employee count with TBL department table. And the rest of the stuff is pretty much a simple join here. And finally you are ordering by total employees. So if we execute this entire stuff we should get the output that we are expecting. So execute this entire stuff. We should get the output that we are accepting. This is the expected output. So execute that entire stuff. Look at that. We get the output that we are expecting. All right. Now the column that you specify for the CTE. Now the column that you specify for the CTE here are optional. If you don't specify, I mean, look at this. Obviously, when you execute this query, you get these two columns. You get these two columns: department ID and total employees. Department ID and total employees. Now, if you don't specify the columns name for your CTE here, if you don't specify the column name for your CTE here, what is going to happen? The same column names are retained. So what is going to happen? The same column names are retained and then used as the column for the CTE. So let's execute this. We get the same output. So let's again execute this. And we get the same output that we have in the presentation slide. Department name and total employees. Okay. Same output. Department name and total employees. Okay. So it is also possible that you can just say, okay, instead of saying department ID, I can just say DEPID. I can say DEPID. And instead of saying total employees, I can say total. Okay. But then the moment you do that, the columns, though this query is returning them as department ID and total employees. For this CTE, they will be mapped to DEPID and total employee, for this CTE, department ID and total employees. For this CTE, they will be mapped to DEPID and total employee will be mapped to total. So when you refer to that CTE in the select statement, you will have to change those columns names accordingly. Okay. Because if I try to execute this now, we get an error. If I execute this, we get an error. Invalid column name, department ID. Because an employee count CTE, I don't find a column called department ID. Because you have redefined, you have renamed that to be DEP ID. So you should use DEP ID, and similarly here you have to specify that as total. So you should use DEP ID here, and total specify that as total. So now when we execute this, we should succeed. So execute this, we should succeed. If we execute this, we should succeed and get the same output. All right. If you don't specify, if you do specify the columns, the number of columns that you specify here, should match with the number of column that your select query is returning. If you say, for example, let's say I have another columns XYZ, XYZ, for example, okay, look at this, your select query is actually returning, two columns, department ID and total employees. Department ID will be mapped to DEP ID, total employee will be mapped to total, but there is no third column in the select query to map to XYZ. So obviously when I try to execute this, it throws an error. So when I execute this, obviously it throws an error stating that employee count has fewer columns than were specified in the columns list. Obviously that makes sense. Okay, so number of columns that you specify here, should match the number of columns returned by the CTE query. All right. Now this is important to keep in mind. If you look at the definition, if you look at the definition of CTE, a CTE is a temporary result set. You know what we mean by that. And then a CTE is a temporary result set that can be referenced within a select, insert, update, or delete statement that immediately follows the CTE. So if you look at the way So if you look at the way we are using this CTE, we are using this CTE within the select statement. If you look at the select statement, it follows the CTE. It follows the CTE. There is nothing between the CTE and this select statement. That is why we are able to use that. But on the other hand, it is the same CTE, except that I have select hello here. I have select hello here. Okay, we are saying we are using another select statement, and within this select statement I'm not referring to this CTE. But then there is another select statement. Another select statement here, where I am referring to this CTE. So obviously what is going to happen by the time we execute this query gets executed. This query gets executed. By the time we execute this query gets executed. This CTE gone. This CTE is gone, because this CTE will be available to a select, insert, update or delete that immediately follows the CTE. If you try to use it anywhere else, then if you try to do something else in between, we get an error. Let's look at this in action. So here we have the employee count CTE. Let's look at this action, this in action. So here we have the employee count CTE. It is the same thing. And then we have the select hello in between. Select hello in between. Now look at this. If I comment that, and then if I try to execute this entire thing, we succeed, we get the output that we were getting before. So execute this. Okay. On the other hand, look at this. The moment I uncomment this, look at this. The moment I uncomment this, we are not using CTE in the select, insert, update or delete statement that immediately follows this CTE. So obviously you cannot access the employee count. So you cannot access the employee count in this select statement, because this is not the immediate select statement, because this is not the immediate select statement for this CTE, for this CTE. So let's see what happens if I try to execute this. We get an error. So execute this. If we try to execute this, we get an error. Stating common table expression defined but not used. So that is why, okay, so that is why in the definition, so that is why in the definition, it is very clear. You know, a CTE is a temporary result set that can be referenced within a select, insert, update, or delete statement that immediately follows the CTE. And I hope that makes sense now. All right. It is also possible to create multiple CTE using a single with clause. Now we know that to create a CTE we use the with clause. So you specify with clause, with keyword, and then the name of the CTE, and then the columns, and then the columns that would make up that CTE as your select query, your CTE select query. So this entire thing is one CTE. So this entire thing, so this entire thing is one CTE. But if you want an additional CTE using the same keyword, same with the keyword, what you can basically do is put a comma. What you can do is basically do is put a comma. Another name of the CTE, another name of CTE, and then the columns that would make up that CTE as, you know, select query, you know, select query, that makes up this CTE. So it is possible to create more than one CTE using the with keyword, just by separating them with commas, separating them by with commas. So what we are doing here, so what we are doing here, It is a pretty simple. Now if you look at this select query, all we are doing is we are getting the total number of employees by department, but we are filtering, we are only doing it for IT and payroll, and here we are doing it for HR and admin departments. So obviously when I execute this query, you should see we get the total number of employees for IT and payroll. So execute this. We get the total number of employees for IT and payrolls department. And when we execute this query, you should see that we get the total number of employees for admin and HR department, and we have named our CTE accordingly, So this gives us employee count by HR and admin department. This gives us the employee counts by payroll and IT department. And the way we are using this, we are using that there is a select statement. There is a select statement. Look at this. Now you might be wondering, okay, I am using this CTE. I am using this CTE. Within this select statement, this is another select statement where I am using, maybe this CTE, so I am not using them within a select statement. That immediately follows CTE. Actually, this entire things is treated as one statement. This entire thing is treated as one statement because you are using the union keyword, and we have spoken about union keyword in the previous sessions of this video series, which basically unions the results of this query with this query. So this entire thing is treated as one statement. So obviously now if I execute this entire thing, you should see total employee by department name for all the 4 departments. So If I execute this entire thing, you should see total employees by department for all the 4 departments. Okay, so this is example. So this is example. So this example illustrate that it is possible to create multiple CTE using a single with keyword with single with key clause. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. But before that, I show you the creation of the table also of this query. So go back to your Visual Studio, and here is the creation of the table. So guys, this is the table. This tables create table TBL employees, defines a table called TBL employee with several columns and a foreign key constraint. This table is designed to store employee information, and these 2 lines constraint foreign key employee department foreign key department ID and references TBL department ID. This line creates a foreign key constraint. It links department ID in TBL employee to DEPT ID in another table called table department. This ensures referential integrity, meaning an employee must be assigned to a department that exists in TBL department. Okay guys, that's it for today. Thank you for listening. Have a great day.